Welcome back to the Lake Protectors podcast, where we are diving into all things about Lake George and the work that we do here. I'm your host, Lindsay Canay, and with us today we have Mr. Lieberum. As friend of the podcast, Randy Rath would say, Jim Lieberum, welcome.
Hi, thanks for having me today.
It's great to have you. So give us a little bit about your background, what you do, where you work.
So my background is I'm not originally from the area. I'm from Broome County, down around Binghamton, New York. That's where Binghamton is. I grew up in the woods, playing in streams. I have a lot of love in the environment. I went to college for natural resources, and I've been in the field since. Worked in Maryland for a little bit as an urban forester. And I came up to the Warren County in 1997 and was one of the first naturalists at Up Beyond a Farm.
Oh, okay.
And then in 1998, almost 27 years ago to the day, I went to Soil and Water.
Okay.
And I've been there since then, and been very fortunate to be there. And through the years, I've worked with the Lake George Association on many projects and programs.
Yes, we're going to talk about some of those today. Now, you're the district manager of Soil and Water.
I am the district manager. I was the water resources specialist for about 12 or 13 years. And then when my predecessor left, I was promoted. And even though it's a promotion, you still have to go through civil service. So I had to take an exam for my position. And fortunately, I passed, and I've been there since. So, and my family and I reside in Warren County, not in the Lake George watershed, but we live in the town of Thurman. So for me, I'm fortunate to cross the Hudson River twice a day, and the Scroon River twice a day. So, water's definitely been in my blood since I was born.
A nice ride to work. What's a day in the life look like for you guys up at Soil and Water?
Well, we do have digital calendars, and we have paper calendars, and we have phone calls. So today, I'm here this morning, and then I have a Zoom call for a grant we're assisting Glens Falls with. And then this afternoon, Monica from the LGA will be on this with me, a Zoom for invasive species for hemlock woolly adelgid. I like to get out in the field as much as possible, and I still make that happen. I'm not strictly an office person, probably 50-50, but I have become more of what I termed a PMA, a professional meeting attender.
Yes, we know those well.
I've been trying to avoid that for years, but there are certain obligations that comes with the job. So, we work not only on water, as if you look at our name, Soil and Water, people might have a misconception of what we do. We don't work on wastewater. We're not the sewer systems where some people actually call us and ask us, "Can you turn our water off?" No. Can you? We have a problem with the sewer. So, but every county in New York State has a soil and water conservation district. And they are approved in state law and enacted on by the local communities. It's a little sad to say I don't remember the year that we were formed in Warren County, but I know we were approved by the county, I believe, possibly in 1959.
Oh, wow.
So we actually go back a long ways.
Totally.
So we work on everything from streams, habitat, crossings, working with town, county, village with permits for natural resources permits. We deal with stormwater management, and it's both the managing, the reporting, but also implementation and improvement projects. We're dealing a lot more with agriculture, surprisingly. A lot of people don't think we have a lot of agriculture, but since there's been a big change in our population, more people are doing locally grown, locally sourced. So mushrooms, maple sugaring, things like that. So we have a pretty active and growing agricultural program in our county. And we're dealing a lot with forestry now. We're actually working on that quite a bit. And then there's always everything in between, to helping out with some trail maintenance, to one of my staff assisted the city of Glens Falls when on Webster Ave in Glens Falls, a rattlesnake got ran over. So that's that's one of my favorite things to bring up, but it's never as necessarily a boring day.
Right.
So
Makes the day go by fast.
it does. It does. And then, we get the ability to come down and do a podcast, and I understand one of my coworkers will be here next week. So he's all excited too.
In 2 weeks, maybe.
Okay.
Yeah. How did a rattlesnake end up in Glens Falls? Do we have that?
There were actually two that were found in the same week. One was at the cemetery at Bay Road, right next to Webster.
Okay.
There's a lot of theories. The prevailing theory that was in the news was that they crawled up underneath a log truck and were brought down during logging.
Okay.
I don't think that's correct though.
Oh, okay. What's your theory?
The two snakes that were found, because Bob from my office used to work with Bill Brown.
Yep.
And so we got a hold of Professor Brown, and Bob actually secured the dead snake, brought it to him. They met at our office, so it's all fascinating when that happens. And when Bill analyzed that one, at least, it was in pristine conditions, about 10 years old. It was very unfortunate because it was a breeding female. It was in great condition. So my way of thinking is somebody had it in an aquarium because there was nothing wrong with it and released it because it was during COVID and maybe they had to leave the area for something. That's my guess. So it actually kind of rolls into like why we're working to get rid of the goldfish in Pond 7. It's these releases that occur.
Yeah, there was a
unintended
goldfish.
Consequences.
Yes, there was a goldfish at the LGA office years ago that had been brought in because someone was going to release it. And it was this frantic, like, no, we'll take it. Just please don't put it in any water bodies. So, well, you mentioned stormwater. So let's talk all things stormwater, starting with what is stormwater? What does it mean?
Okay. Well, stormwater, and I usually just follow up with stormwater runoff.
Yes.
Is anything that doesn't any water that doesn't infiltrate into the ground. And it's not just during rain events, because when we have snow melt,
right,
we have runoff. Now, when people see stormwater runoff, and I can understand that they instinctually just think, oh, it's bad. And it's not. It's natural. It's part of the natural erosion process. It formed the earth. It forms the topography. What we're concerned with in our area, if we did not have any land disturbance or changes, we wouldn't care about it.
Right.
And it's all driven by Mother Nature. But we do care because we're part of the living environment.
Right.
So when we have roads and we have development and we have changes to the land, we have disturbances. And those disturbances can alter how water flows off of the land, how much water flows off of the land, and what is in the water. So you could have 100 gallons. You could say, I have 100 gallons of stormwater runoff. And I would say, what is that coming from? What's in it? And if it's coming from the woods and it's all natural or very clean, really, who cares?
Right.
If it's coming from your garage and you do a lot of oil changes in it and it washes down, the problem is what's in it.
Yes.
So you can have a lot of items from, usually what people notice is muddy water.
Right.
So you can have sediment. So sediment can have negative impacts. I'm sure we can discuss that later if you want, or I can go into it. Yeah, let's do it. Okay, well, sediment getting into a system such as Westbrook, for example. Westbrook is a trout stream. Obviously, you see other fish in wildlife in there. Trout spawn in the fall. They need clean gravel. And when they don't have that clean gravel, they can't successfully spawn.
Okay.
But also, when you have, let's say there's a failure at a construction site or a stream bank just collapses, as we would say, you have a lot of additional material going into the water, and acts as an abrasive on the gill structures. And what we have to think about is not just the trout, because again, we as humans like to focus on something that represents streams, but we also have to look at the ecology and the biology. So the macroinvertebrates, as you are familiar with, with the gills that they have, they get negatively impacted, they get buried, and if you lose that bottom of the food chain, then the rest of the chain is going to collapse. So sediment is problematic there. You can see at the end of Westbrook, we have the delta, one of, I believe, 9 deltas in Lake George that are out there. And whatever is adhered to the soil particles, that can get in there. So potentially, we generally look at nitrogen or phosphorus as something that would be in there. In our area, we're not overly, it's not as bad with our sandy soils for nutrients.
Right.
As opposed to, let's say, Washington County and the Champlain Canal where they have clay soils.
Yeah.
But
And more
there's a reason
agriculture.
why, there's a reason why our waters are so clear and clean. It's because they're relatively nutrient low.
Yes.
So any additional nutrients can cause a problem.
Yep.
And along with sediment, you can have, nutrients if, let's say, someone fertilizers, and they fertilize incorrectly, as I say, because fertilizer, is necessary in certain cases, and that's why we always say conduct a soil test.
Mm-hmm.
You want a good, healthy vegetative cover, and if you don't have that, that can actually have a detriment because you can have soil loss through that from erosion. But get a soil test done, and you want to make sure that whoever's doing it, whether it's yourself or you hire somebody, knows the correct application, the ingredients in the application by percent, and that the item or the equipment that you're using is calibrated to put it down at the correct rate, and then timing. So today, I think they may be calling for some rain this afternoon.
Yeah.
It's that, do you hurry up and get it down, or will that wash off?
Right.
So it's a negative impact in a couple of ways. One, your lawn doesn't get the benefit of that because it's washed off. Two, it gets into the environment, which doesn't need it. And three, financially, out of your pocket, you have to pay money to do it again. Yeah, so, and then heavy metals from cars, the rust,
right,
brake linings, things like that, they wash off. Bacteria, petroleum products. So if you think anything that you've ever seen drip, dropped, or lying on a road, that can potentially get into our water.
Become stormwater runoff. How does one go about getting a soil test?
So there are different ways to do it, but what we usually recommend is, first of all, if you have a question on it, you can feel free to call our office.
Okay.
But we go through what's called Dairy 1, which is through Cooperative Extension. And Cooperative Extension is right across from our office in Warrensburg. Basically, you collect the soil, and we can go through. We can walk somebody through it, but essentially you collect a soil sample, let it dry out, and you bring it to Cornell, and you fill out some paperwork.
Okay.
And they send it off. I believe it's about $17.
Okay.
And the one thing to bear in mind is, if you have a quarter-acre lawn, you might do one sample.
Right.
If you have 2-3 acres. You can still do one sample, but you do a composite. So you take from a few different, so you kind of do an average for that.
Okay.
If you're a farmer and you have fields, you would want to do discrete samples.
For each
field, yes.
Okay.
Yes. So for the vast majority of your listeners here, I would say it would be either a single pull or a composite sample.
Of a few. Okay.
Yeah. So it's very straightforward. And then within 5 to 10 days or 7 to 10 days, there'll be an email to you and to Extension or our office, whoever assists you. And it gives you recommendation. It gives you the analysis. So nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium. It'll give you some pH, calcium.
Okay.
And then it gives recommendations based on what your goal or need is.
Of which fertilizer you should use?
Fertilizer or soil amendment, such as lime.
Okay.
But it's based on, do you want turf grass? Do you want, does Lindsay want to put an orchard in her property?
No orchard, but lots of flowers.
Okay. Well, so.
Big on flowers, perennials, love them.
Yeah. So, and if you, you can certainly go and purchase an inexpensive.
At-home kit?
Yeah. And I think for the small lot owner, someone like that, that's probably going to be sufficient.
Yeah.
But for $17 in this day and age, you get it done, and then at least you can compare it to your
and to
$12.
have recommendations.
Yeah.
That's, and they can call you guys for all the help with that.
Yeah, we can assist with that. It goes, like I said, through Extension. It's just, we deal a lot. Nick Rowell deals a lot with soil health and other recommendations to improve your soil for the ability for stormwater infiltration, retention. And we're big into, as you know, green infrastructure and reutilizing what we can.
Right.
So
you talked about rain, and it seems like it's been so humid lately, and we have these humid mornings, and then at some point in the afternoon, the sky just kind of explodes and dumps so much rain at such a fast rate. So that, of course, is problematic with stormwater because if it's falling that fast and running over the ground, really nothing can infiltrate, right?
Correct. And the other problem with that is a lot of our infrastructure is designed on certain volumes.
Okay.
And it can handle a certain amount of stormwater at a given point in time.
Right.
And when you look at some of the information, and I've just done a simple, and I could be way off the mark here, but I looked at a 1990 isometric curve graph for stormwater runoff or rainfall from USDA, and the average rainfall of a 100-year storm, which is a 1% expected probability of that type of event at any given time. So we could have 5 of those in 3 days.
Yes.
Okay. It was around 4 inches, low 4 inches.
Okay.
Now, a neat little website is and I don't have it handy, but it's the Cornell Extreme Precipitation website.
Okay.
You can go enter some parameters, and it gets updated periodically, and it'll give you a chart based on what you're looking at as far as rainfall intensity and events. And it gives a range now, which I think is reasonable, for that 100-year type of event. But if you use their average and you compare it, we're anywhere between 1/4 and 1/2 inch more rain than in 1990.
Yeah.
Now, I graduated high school in 1990, so I'm old, but not that old. So that 1/2 inch could be significant. And I think it was 2 weeks ago, maybe 3 weeks ago, where the $1 million quarter mile was flooded.
Yeah.
There was a lot of water down there from that event. I happened to be last Wednesday in Queensbury. I had driven through Glens Falls on Wednesday, and my truck by the Glens Falls National Bank and the library read 93 degrees. I went up to Harbor Freight.
Okay. Yes. We all know and love that.
And the lightning was striking all over south into Lake George and everything. You could see it was wonderful to watch. I pulled in, went inside. I heard the rain hammering, as we would say.
Yeah.
I went out. The parking lot drains pretty well, but there was an inch of water in the parking lot.
And they're like uphill too, so uphill. It would all run to the road.
Yep. And I went back to my truck, topped in, and it was probably 20 minutes after I'd gone by the library, and the temperature had dropped 21 degrees. And when I went up Aviation Road, the water coming down Aviation Road on the Greenway North, I believe they call it, which is across from the mall, that development, the water coming down the road was almost up on the sidewalk.
Yes, I was at the mall at that time. It was like a river in the park.
So I'm not exaggerating.
No, I couldn't believe it. I was trying to strategically find an entrance that was somewhat uphill so that I wasn't walking through probably 4 inches of water at any given point. And then I was there for maybe 20 minutes, came outside. It was hot again, and all of the water had dissipated. But it's going into all the storm drains that are there.
It is. And then if you think about it, if you go take a look at Cemetery Brook, which is the stream over on Quaker Road that's over by the Golden Corral. And it flows into Halfway Brook by the bike path. And Halfway Brook. When you have those extreme events where, again, it could be 2 inches of rain,
right?
But if it falls in 10 minutes, that's a lot of water,
right?
So the water volumes increase, and that can increase the amount of erosion on the stream banks, causing sedimentation, causing people to lose some of their property. And as I always say, it's when you're out there looking at stormwater and erosion, you have to understand if you're with somebody what they're looking at.
Right.
So it could be someone from the biological perspective, from the DEC. Hey, we've probably lost a bunch of brook trout, like the Halloween storm in 2019.
Okay.
Trout Brook up in Hague. It flows actually up to Lake Champlain.
Okay.
There were sections of that stream where, and I went with Bob from my office, and I'm not exaggerating at all. There were sections of that stream that had no material left in it. It was down to bedrock. It looked like a pool table.
Because it just had been
pushed
washed
all
away.
that, washed it out. So what good does that do for the ecology of the stream?
Right.
So people also, if you're out there, a landowner will look and they'll say, who's going to put back my stream bank? Well, that's really on the onus of the landowner.
Right.
But then at what point does it cause a health issue, and would a municipality consider helping because the a septic system is exposed. And we saw that in some places, like in Luzerne in
So
2011.
Yes, there was a lot of
Tropics from
flooding in 2011 from Irene. And then prior to that, in maybe 2010, there was a lot of flooding down in Luzerne from just the rain melt and the Sacandaga over.
So I think that might have been 2011 too, because
it was like back to back, like a fall and then a spring. That was the
Memorial Day storm.
Yes.
And
then it was maybe 3 months later?
Yes. I had been stuck out in the Auburn area after the New York State Envirothon because our office car died. And so I was stuck out there for a few days, and that front went through.
Yes.
And my wife called me, and she took our dog down to our friend's house in Warrensburg because Thurman had a tornado warning. And I came back. It was a Saturday I got back, and I brought the vehicle back to the office. I hopped in my pickup, and it's the first time, I think, ever that I heard the emergency broadcast system actually, like, this is not a test type of thing. And I drove home, and the rain just hammered again.
It was terrible.
Yeah. And then things washed out. So we've seen a lot of events. And again, I mentioned to you that I had a hazard mitigation presentation with Anne Marie Mason from Emergency Services last night. And we went through some of the storms on different things. And I think it was 2005 or 6. The year escapes me, but town of Bolton was hit very hard, especially in the County Route 11 area.
Okay.
And I just looked up the information on that, and parts of that area in a 6-hour span, I think, had over 6 inches of rain.
Wow.
So you see these events, and then there's tangible impacts.
Right.
And that goes back to our discussion that we had last night online, on Zoom. It was resiliency.
Right.
And some of resiliency is fixing or reducing the amount of stormwater that runs off, because inherently, if you reduce the volume, you're going to clean up what's going down there.
Right.
And it's going to strengthen our infrastructure and our ability to just conduct business and to be able to go to our doctor's appointments or go to the grocery store or go to daycare and things like that. So,
without a river running through the parking lot.
And that's the thing that a lot of people may not be able to understand is, if we do a better job with managing our runoff, improving our water quality, it all actually filters through the rest of our lives.
Right.
So if we can, don't disassociate environmental improvements with other things, because if we do it once the right way, then one, we're not spending as much money.
Right.
This is not cheap.
Right.
But you're reducing future costs and future numerous fixes.
There's longevity in it.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay. So what are things people can do at their own home, their business, to help reduce their stormwater runoff?
All right. So one is, there's different levels, right?
Okay.
Because if it all comes down to the site.
Right.
So if you have a steep site, you're probably not going to be able to do much. But in that case, maybe you do retention. So, the LGA and you can, through the years, you've had a rain barrel program. So retaining that water for a longer period of time.
Okay.
Through barrels, through cisterns.
That's all a system with gutters. Gutters drain to the rain barrel. Sometimes the rain barrel even goes into a rain garden, something to help with that. Okay.
And that's retaining.
Yes.
That's retaining the water, because you're just slowing down that peak rate of discharge as much as possible. And you have to understand, is a 10% improvement good? Well, yes.
It's better than nothing.
Right. That's how I look.
If nobody did anything, it would just always be getting worse and worse.
And I go for small victories.
Yeah.
And then, when you start looking at expensive projects, then you need to start looking at the dollar or the benefits a little bit more.
Right.
But, if you have a flat area, then maybe it's different ways to grade to not necessarily have rain barrels, but to have retention through natural drainage to wetlands or to other stormwater systems.
Yep.
And working it into the landscape. I have one at my house that I put in, because a lot of things that I go out on site visits and recommend, I do myself ahead of time to kind of say, does this make sense? I'm an average person.
Right.
We are average. And so if I can do it, anybody
can.
pretty much can do it with a little
Right.
knowledge. And that's where people have a tendency to get, I don't want to say scared, but they're afraid to do something because they don't have the knowledge. Well, here's where the knowledge is, and you can make a decision, you know? So, you can have it rain gardens. You can have, I mean, in yards, you know, if you have sandy soils and you can get a separation and you don't want green infrastructure, you know, you just don't want it because sometimes people I don't want to maintain it.
Right.
Okay. Hey, that's your property.
Yeah.
A simple dry well is an excellent way to take your gutters and put it right into there. Clean water going into the dry well, right into your lawn. That's all you need to do.
So the gutter drips down.
The gutter is
comes
directed
down into a dry well that's underground in your property. Okay.
Yeah. So for years, a number of people actually used to do that for discharge from their gray water systems, not the septic.
Yeah.
But for like
I've seen
laundry.
a few of those. Yeah.
So just looking at something like that, if you don't want to do green infrastructure, if you don't want to do it, you don't have the availability, but you have the availability of siting in so it doesn't impact your well, your neighbor's well, and if you have a septic, you can put a dry well in right there. You could put multiple ones in there because you are taking essentially clean water from your roof and you're just putting it into the ground.
Is there any maintenance that comes with that dry well? Does it have to be dug up, cleaned out?
You have to inspect it and potentially clean it out.
Yeah.
But if you think about it, if you have basically, you wouldn't have water flowing over the top of the lawn going into it. You would have a pipe going to it.
Right.
So leaf debris.
Yeah.
You know, so you might have to clean it out once in a while. But if you're looking at the benefits, cost, that's a simple thing to do. And it doesn't have to be like what highway departments use.
Right.
You know,
it doesn't
there's different
have to
sizes.
be that. Yeah. Okay.
You can make your own.
Really?
I mean, I mean, you could make one out of wood if you want, or treated lumber. You know, it doesn't have to be 4 feet deep. It could be a couple feet deep. Again, it all comes back to the site and the soils and the ability to infiltrate. Now, you don't want to have your kids dumping paint down there. You know, so there's a lot of that. There's that education. Right. No deleterious substances.
Yeah, just water.
Which we do see landowners and illicit dumpers doing.
All right. So what are some other stormwater mitigation projects people can do at home?
All right. Some other activities. I mean, one of the biggest things is if you do have, if you are disturbing the ground, you know, use erosion sediment control products.
Okay.
There's a variety of them out there now. You can buy them from the big box stores.
Okay.
It's very easy. Button up that open area as soon as possible. So get seeding down. Get mulching finalized, because you want the seed to break. You want the roots to start establishing on the turf or the plants or whatever you're putting in there. It's going to reduce the ability of that soil to move.
Right.
By keeping that soil in place, the benefit for you is the nutrients that are in the soil, the organic matter that's in the soil is staying on your property. Right. So if it leaves, then you have to find some way to amend it. Right. So do you bring in, and what do you bring in? If you bring in mulch or a topsoil, where is that from? What's in it? You know, are you bringing like jumping worms in? Which are very common in the county now.
Okay, because of soil being brought in.
Soil, mulch, you know, they're annelids, they move. But yeah, it's from my understanding, especially on national stores that carry bark mulch. A lot of the cocoons of the jumping worms are mixed in there.
I mean, even when you buy a bag of soil, there will oftentimes be like little flies, bugs, something in that.
Yep. So, you know, fixing or stabilizing right away. Reducing your footprint. You know, all this is kind of, as you can see, we're kind of going from the bigger stuff for landowners down to, because what I like to say is
easier things.
Well, and really, when we look at projects, when we're looking at doing something, you know, why do we just rip and tear all the time? Right. You know, this is a total aside, but I'll use an example. I had to do some plumbing in our shower, and I had to open up part of the wall.
Okay.
Well, I didn't take the entire wall down to rebuild it.
Right.
I opened up what I needed
Just
to.
a section.
Yes. So you can, think of things like that.
In sections.
Yeah, in sections.
Yeah.
We call it, phasing and sequencing.
Yep.
So you just phase it. You just have it properly sequenced.
Right.
If you have to open up a large area, close up what you can, move to the next. And you just follow the same sequence of operations.
Okay.
So perhaps one thing that I like to tell people is, yes, I know you want to have your trees planted, but until the heavy equipment's gone, until everything else, I would not.
Right.
It's easy for people to want to plant trees because there's an immediate improvement, right? And trees,
it's a visual.
Trees are great for stormwater management too.
Yeah.
But if you have compacted soil, you need to decompact it. And until you do that, you can't plant any trees. Otherwise, you're just throwing money away.
Right.
Yeah. So beyond that, again, it's how you manage it. And if you do a good job with that thought process, then you're hopefully going to reduce the need to do additional items. Homeowners associations, neighborhoods can get together and look at potentially larger projects.
Permeable pavement.
Permeable pavement. Maybe putting in different wet ponds, which are stormwater basins.
Yep.
Back in my day, they were dry ponds, so water would flow in and then it would dry up. Now a wet pond is designed with different elevations in it.
Yes.
And designed to have a greater diversity of plant species to increase the aquatic species. And why do we do that? Because we want a living, breathing project. And people will point and say, well, there's mosquitoes in there. Yeah, there's mosquitoes everywhere. But by encouraging the diversity of plants, we're going to encourage more dragonflies, banded killifish, which are top-feeding minnow, which are native to our area.
Okay.
They're pretty neat. If you've never seen one,
I don't know.
come up to our
I mean,
office,
I
we'll show
probably
you.
have, but
They're
not that
neat.
I would say
they're very small.
That's what that is.
About 1.5 inches long, but
Cute.
their mouths are turned up. So they are designed to feed on mosquito larvae.
Out of the water.
Right at the very top of the water. Yep. So you want to have things like that, right? Damselflies.
Yeah.
So that's all you can do. So basically, you're trying to encourage local biocontrol with native species as much as possible. But then, if you have an area where there's, especially a lot of it is driven by problems. So if you have a flooded road, that's always a big problem. Is there an area where some green infrastructure, such as a dry detention, can go, where it's a grass lawn, nobody notices it, it fills up with water, it drains,
and it looks this.
Somebody mows it to keep the woody vegetation down, much like a septic leach field.
Yep.
It blends in. I like it when any of our office projects almost go unnoticed, because that means we did a good job blending it into the landscape and making it so that it is part of the landscape.
Right.
So
that's awesome. Let's talk about some of your projects. And you've talked a couple times about a stormwater wetland, Westbrook, of course, being.
I love Westbrook.
Yes. Who doesn't?
Yeah.
Westbrook, in my mind now, is what it currently is, which is the stormwater treatment and all these little ponds that flood down. I don't even remember what it looked like before, but that was a huge project that you guys were a part of. So let's talk about that.
Yeah, so the Westbrook Conservation Initiative, we just usually use WBCI anymore.
Okay.
Because, sounds hip.
Yes.
Okay. And,
love an abbreviation.
And it started off, actually the history of that area, I found, I did a presentation for the New York State Wetlands Forum, and I presented on this.
Okay.
And that was earlier this year. I found some old maps, and there were 2 streams down there at one time. And one of them is more towards the fort, and one was a little closer to the Tiki restaurant.
Were they both considered Westbrook or 2 separate streams?
They had one labeled Westbrook and the other one was not labeled. So, but the 2 different maps, one of them showed them merging right at the lake, and the other one didn't. So, these were done in 1760s, I think. Ooh, so, they're estimations.
Yeah.
But it was a wetland there.
Yeah.
So, through the years, there's been a lot of manipulation of that stream. Yeah. And basically just bringing it up quickly into the 90s, Dr. James Sutherland from the DEC and Tom Jarrett saw that there was a lot of concern because with stormwater runoff, especially in that area, because that being the developed area of the watershed. The National Urban Runoff Pollution Plan, sorry, I don't remember the acronym. It was called the NERP study.
Okay.
Basically identified stormwater from developed areas as being the major impact. And this was on a number of lakes across the United States. Lake George was one. So they collaborated along with some other partners at the state to say, hey, what can we do? There used to be a big flat green field, and there used to be, Charlie Woods owned it.
Yes.
And there used to be a bar called Charlie's Saloon, I think, right there.
Yep.
It was right down the road. So
there's a bar everywhere.
Yeah,
Every piece of land used to be a bar. So
well, and so it was just a big field.
okay.
So speeding everything up through a little starts and stops for various reasons. The LGA, the Fund for Lake George, the Lake George Land Conservancy, the Village of Lake George, the Town of Lake George, and Warren County all work together to purchase the property.
Okay.
It's the north side of Westbrook and the south side.
Yeah.
The north side was to be festival space, as it is.
Yes.
And the south side was a stormwater wetland.
Okay.
And I applaud everybody for working on that, because if you can imagine, you have, first of all, there's 3 governmental entities.
Right.
You have 3 distinct environmental groups, and then they all have to work together in a collaborative manner, and they did. So through various funding sources, the Westbrook Conservation Initiative was developed, and it's a series of ponds. So water comes off of Route 9, and it goes into the Pond 1, which is the forebay, which is the settling area.
Okay.
So that's really, when we've cleaned that out a couple times, because that's where the material ends up.
Like any,
initially.
like the
coarse material, sands, runoff, a lot of woody
the things
debris.
coming off cars.
Yep, that's where it's going to be.
Okay.
We had it analyzed last time, and because our concern was heavy metals.
Right.
But no issues.
Right.
So good. That's
no
good.
issues now.
No issues now.
Yes.
So there are 7 ponds in this network.
Yeah.
And if you think about it, every pond is a sediment filter. Every pond is a nutrient uptake for nutrients, and then the connections between there. I mean, it is a highly productive area because of the nutrients. So when the water leaves the Westbrook Conservation Initiative, there's been some studies that the LGA has done that show that the phosphorus removal is excellent, nitrogen removal is excellent, and the only challenge is actually everything's great, and the only challenge is salt.
Right.
So we're not going to stop that. So there's a gravel wetland as part of that too.
Okay.
Part of the issue, though, that we've encountered is that it's high groundwater there.
Okay.
So we've been talking for a while and seeing what could be done to retrofit that to make that more effective. And then the other thing that people may notice at the outlet where it goes into Lake George, and I know you've seen this and probably have had questions on it, is the water is not orange, but people say there's orange water.
Right.
If you haven't looked at it, it's the color of a cheese doodle. And it's the rocks, and what it is, it's iron oxidizing bacteria.
Right. You see it sometimes on frozen surfaces in the winter too.
It's natural.
It's startling. But then when you know that it's okay and it's natural,
right.
Right.
It's going in one way or the other. It's just a conversion from ferrous or ferric iron or vice versa.
Okay.
So, and that happens. So a lot of wetlands produce that.
And lots of stormwater reduction at that.
It's a huge benefit.
Yeah.
we had a wetland training a few years ago, and I brought the professor from SUNY Coble School who did the wetland training, and he was blown away by the diversity of species, the size of some of these plants. Joe Pye weed, if any of your listeners are familiar with it, there's Joe Pye weed down there that's 8 feet tall.
Wow.
It's amazing. So the bad news is we know it's making that stuff grow.
Right.
But the good news is that stuff is growing and taking up the nutrients.
And helping filter out nutrients.
Yeah. So the Westbrook, and
it's a nice park.
It's a great park. People like to walk around. It's
always busy down there.
Absolutely. And I'm down there at least monthly doing an inspection.
Checking on it?
Yep. The Village of Lake George does the routine maintenance, such as mowing and garbage. Town of Lake George installs the garbage baskets to remove that. There's dog waste recycling. Thank you for people who do that.
Yes.
As for those of you who don't, please pick up after your dog.
Truly,
and
it
if
is
you
the
do pick up, and
simplest
if you do
thing.
use the bags, don't throw them into the woods.
Nope.
Deposit them.
Yes, there are spaces there for you to do so.
So, as far as that goes, we're very happy with that. We've done maintenance through the years of different things. So we're continuing to do that. We just planted with the Land Conservancy 8 or 9, and the Village of Lake George, 8 or 9 trees to replace some of that originally were planted and died, but also some that an over-eager beaver got in and took down. And yes, we learned from that, and because we had a tree guard on one of the sugar maples that I planted about 4 years ago, and it was doing great, and the beaver was just tall enough to chew it about an inch above the tree guard. So we made 4-foot tree guards out of wire this time. So if we have a beaver that's
Hopefully
4 foot,
they're not that
that's
tall.
kind of my point.
Although historically, I had an old Snapple cap fact that said that they used to be the size of bears. So
yeah, well,
terrifying. A few other projects you guys have done. I know I-87 was a big one up by, is it exit 22?
Exit 22.
Okay,
Yep.
can you talk about that?
Yeah, so the LGA received a nice grant from the Lake Champlain Basin Program. And it was to work on areas of I-87 with our office in the New York State Department of Transportation out of Warrensburg. Because a lot of the area, a lot of the roadside drainage was lined with macadam, blacktop.
Okay, yes.
So a couple things were occurring.
And they were like the little blacktop things within the ditches too.
Yep. So
I guess the point was to help run the water. But...
Right. And so when you look at it, it's tough for me to sit here and say, 20, 30 years ago, why did they do that?
Right.
Because
doing the best they can at the time. Yeah.
We learned. That's part of it. And you work to improve and not to make the same mistake.
Right.
Okay. So technology, knowledge, availability of things gets better.
Yeah.
So basically, by removing sections of the macadam, you're exposing the soil again. Some of that soil is compacted, so it takes a while to decompact naturally. But what happens is you're allowing a certain volume of water to infiltrate now in there. So if you remember what we talked about before, now you're reducing the volume at the end point. Okay? So that's improving. We seeded and mulched it. We used different types of erosion control products. And you now have nutrient uptake.
Right.
And the water coming in there will allow the plants to establish. You allow the nutrients to feed the plants. And the big consideration that a lot of people don't think about with driveways, with parking lots. Actually, we were out yesterday looking at some projects, and Monica and we noticed someone with a dog. And I happened to look down, and the air temperature was about 85 degrees out. And I remember reading a bunch of stuff lately, and it's like, that pavement's probably about 105 degrees.
Yes.
People are concerned about their dogs.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely 100%. Well, I'm also concerned with our cold water streams. Yeah. So when you have 135 degree water from that 2 p.m. rainstorm rushing down into Westbrook, what does that do?
It's increasing the temperature.
You have thermal pollution. That's considered thermal pollution. And you have a change. So we can do everything right in the stream, but whatever we're inputting, anybody who looks, you have to look, you have to look at the watershed.
Right.
A lot of us get focused on the water itself. It all starts in the watershed.
Right. And the Lake George watershed is very steep. So
very steep,
no matter what you're
relatively small.
Yeah. But you're kind of fighting gravity with water because
it's all downhill from here.
It's all downhill. And particularly with these rainstorms where it is so, the volume is so intense over the course of a short time period. It's not a full day where you get 2 inches. Right. It's 20 minutes, 2 inches of rain, and it creates these problems.
Yep. Yeah. And so when you have those problems, we have a tendency to ditch. We have a tendency to put macadam or blacktop down to alleviate our problem. But does that fix the downstream problems or exacerbate? It exacerbates usually. So that's the reason for, Dan Baruch, enforces the...
We love Dan Baruch.
So Dan, they have their guidance, they have their laws and requirements.
Yeah.
Because if everybody dumped all their stormwater in, then the roads would be a mess all the time. They would be uncontrollable. There'd be damages all the time. So everybody has to do their part. And this is considered and called non-point source pollution because everybody has a role in improving it. And, do I damage the environment? Absolutely, because I drive to Warrensburg. I drive
exist.
everybody, right. So road salt, road sand, just having the resurfacing. So we're never going to be 100%.
Right.
But if we in general can move the needle up a little bit, then we're going to have those benefits. But then always keeping an eye out to the future, because when we're looking at data now, that doesn't necessarily reflect what it's going to be in 20 or 30 years. And depending on what you're looking at, if you're looking at the rainfall, if you're looking at temperature, if you're looking at migration patterns, what the only thing I think we can agree on is there's a great diversity in projections.
Right.
So, but again, the one thing I will say from being a kid in New York to now, what I really notice, a lot more significant winds. It seems to be we get a lot more wind.
It's windier, power goes out more.
Yeah. Actually, 21 or something like that, we had a windstorm come through in April.
Yes.
It knocked a tree down at my house, which I was going to take down. But it was one of those, and I couldn't have done it better because it missed my canoe rack, it missed my well. It worked out well. But it also snapped our sign at our office, which was pretty beefy. There were 6x6 posts, and it just snapped it. So there's a little rot in there, but that's where you have a lot of things that I don't remember as a kid, and maybe I just don't remember. But it seems to be we're going out on a lot of these. We hear about that because I'm the hazard mitigation coordinator for the county, and last year, Glens Falls, Queensbury, they got a lot of windstorms and a lot of damage. And part of it is because we've also moved into areas where we hadn't had development.
Right.
Trees are now 20, 30 years older, bigger, declining, So there's a lot of factors that
Well, in a warming climate in and of itself.
Yeah.
I remember when I was a kid, my family and I was caught up in a microburst up north in like maybe 1995.
Yes.
And that was this like big jaw-dropping thing. But you see these things on the news pop up, and there's a hazard for it. There's a warning for it. We had a tornado warning last week, or maybe it was Sunday.
Yeah. So actually on Sunday, West Winfield, which is in Otsego County.
Okay.
I've been through West Winfield number of times. My friend used to live down there. They had an F1 tornado touchdown, destroyed a barn and some other items down there. And that's south of Utica, above Cooperstown. So next time you'll have to watch our hazard mitigation presentation.
I will.
Because we talk about tornadoes too.
Okay.
We had a tornado in Warren County 2 years ago.
One ripped through Hadley.
That's the one. And a week before, there was one in Saratoga.
I've never seen anything like that. The golf course over in Hadley had probably 24 trees uprooted,
and
it occurred within, I think, a 3-minute time period. It was insane.
So you had the one there, and the other one that we have a picture of, and I don't recall the year, it must be around mid-2000s, was up in North Creek. There was an F0, and it picked up the Little League hot dog shack, smashed it against the chain link fences. And then, so it kind of came from the Little Gore area. I got through there. And then went past the town hall in North Creek and down River Road and crossed over into the town of Chester. And when I went up there and looked at it, you could see the trees knocked down. It's not what you see from a Joplin, Missouri.
No, but not what we are used to historically here. So things are, even the weather, where it's so humid and then the sky explodes, it's like living in the South.
Yeah. And I remember growing up where I was, a big tornado went, I think it was a 2 or a 3 north of where I grew up. And, I grew up in farm country, and a barn collapsed and killed a bunch of cows. And that was a big deal. And that was early 80s, and so there was no social media. There were no cell phones. You still had, some of you folks might remember party lines. You remember?
Like a telephone?
So a party line, you didn't have a private line. You had a bunch of people on a line. And
that was normal. Everyone shared?
Depending on where you were. Some places couldn't have it. Yeah.
See, I grew up with dial-up, and just sharing that alone was kind of...
So dial-up, I had dial-up. My dad still has a push-button rotary phone, or push-button phone on the wall.
I do love those. They're just just fun.
We still, if you want, next time I go home, I think we have a rotary phone. I can bring it back for you.
Okay. I do love them. And they work all the time.
They do.
Well, we probably have to wrap up. I think you have to go soon. So final thoughts.
I would, what I usually do is tell people, people are going to do kind of what they want to do.
Yeah.
All right. So let's keep it in a reasonable perspective and say, let's minimize what your impacts are.
Yes.
Okay. So that's the first thing. Ultimately, we are the stewards of the land. If you want to put up a garage, okay, there's going to be positive impacts and negative impacts.
Right.
The negative impact we are going to look at and say is, well, there goes some habitat or there's always justification. The positive impact is, hey, my car is going to be undercover. It's not going to rust as much, so I'm not going to have as much heavy metals if you really want to get into that. So just doing little improvements is important. Fixing those open areas as much as possible. If you're disturbing ground, do soil tests.
Yep.
Reach out to the LGA, reach out to our office, reach out to Cornell, reach out to Lake George Land Conservancy.
Right.
We're here to help. We have a lot of experience in dealing with different things. Our office, soil and water districts are set up to assist landowners.
Okay.
So we are allowed to go on private property with permission.
Yeah.
That's not an issue. I go on site visits all the time. So we are truly there just to try to help. And again, maybe it won't be a great idea. Maybe it's just an idea, but sometimes there are no good ideas.
Right.
So you have to look at what's the least bad.
Right. And you guys can help cater.
Yeah, we can help with that. And again, just partnering with you folks, it always works out because you have that availability as well.
Yeah.
So, that's basically what it is. Just do a little better. If everybody does a little better, we'll be fine.
That's right.
And then leave the heavy lifting to those people who can do it, like the communities.
Yeah.
Those are the ones. But the average person, take care of what you can at your place. And the rest of the stuff we have to work on through municipalities, municipal work, stormwater management programs, things like that.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today. This has been lovely.
Oh, thank you. It was very fun.
Your M&Ms are waiting for you.
Excellent. I was going to say this was actually my first podcast.
Oh, well, welcome.
Yeah, thank you.
We're glad to have you. Glad to have the first. And we got your coworker on in, I think, 2 weeks.
Okay.
2 weeks. He's going to come chat with us.
Yeah, that'll be interesting. They do a lot of, great videography.
Yeah, we're going to talk all about that.
So, No, thanks for asking us. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, well, thank you so much, Jim, and tune in next week. The Lake Protectors Podcast is a production of the Lake George Association. To check out the work that the LGA is doing, follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Lake George Association. You can also visit our website at lakegeorgeassociation.org. This episode was produced by Jacqueline Mignot. If you'd like to hear more, follow us on Spotify, Apple, or wherever you get your podcasts.